What you're about to hear is not just a speech, it's a wake-up call to the world. A moment the media tried to silence, but the truth was too loud to ignore. When a former U.S. president admitted that Iran struck Israel hard, it wasn't just breaking news, it was history in motion. This isn't about politics, this is about power, pride, and a people who rose in the face of pressure, fear, and isolation. The streets of Tehran didn't just celebrate, they roared with the sound of long-pressed dignity. This is a story of resilience, of shaking empires, of rewriting narratives carved in stone, from Trump's shocking confession to the fireworks lighting up Iran's sky. Every second of this journey is a revelation. So don't blink, don't scroll, because by the end of this video, you'll understand why the world will never be the same again. When former President Donald Trump addressed the global community and openly admitted that Iran had struck Israel hard, it sent shockwaves through the political and media landscape. His words carried weight not just because of his previous position as the leader of the world's most powerful nation, but because they broke from the traditional Western narrative that often downplays Iran's military capabilities. Trump's tone wasn't one of casual observation, it was layered with a mix of surprise, realism, and perhaps even reluctant respect. In acknowledging the force and precision behind Iran's strike, Trump did what few Western leaders have done. He gave Iran credit for a calculated and impactful military action. This was not a random flare-up, not a warning shot. It was, as he put it, a powerful and unexpected move that changed the game. This admission alone shifted public discourse. It forced analysts, commentators, and citizens alike to reconsider what they thought they knew about Iran's place in regional and global power structures. Trump's statement was also significant because of the timing and delivery. He didn't sugarcoat it, and he didn't attempt to cover the blow with diplomatic niceties. In fact, his bluntness illuminated a harsh reality. Iran was no longer the passive player waiting to be contained. It had evolved, grown strategic, and decided to assert its strength in a way that the world could not ignore. The fact that this acknowledgement came from a U.S. president, past or present, was symbolic. It pierced through the traditional Western media filters and laid bare a moment of truth. That moment shattered illusions. It made clear that the Middle East's power chessboard had been disrupted and that Iran had just flipped over a few key pieces. Trump's words, whether intended or not, validated what many in the East already believed, that Iran had successfully challenged Israel's sense of invulnerability. Moreover, this admission served to intensify the psychological impact of the strike itself. It was one thing for Iran to proclaim victory, but it was another for an American leader to publicly affirm it. That changed the perception on both sides of the conflict. For Iran's allies and citizens, it was a badge of honor. For Israel and its supporters, it was a moment of reckoning. Trump's words echoed far beyond the podium. They reverberated through capitals, military bases, and resistance strongholds, leaving behind a new sense of realism and respect regarding Iran's growing reach. Trump's admission of Iran's powerful strike on Israel didn't just register as a passing political comment. It marked a turning point in the regional power dynamics of the Middle East. For decades, the dominant narrative framed Iran as a nation under pressure, constrained by sanctions, isolated diplomatically, and constantly being checked by military alliances and regional coalitions. But with this single strike and its aftermath, a different image of Iran emerged, one of strategic competence, bold execution, and growing influence. The balance of power, once seen as rigidly tilted in favor of Israel and its Western allies, began to show cracks. Iran demonstrated not only the capability to retaliate, but to do so with devastating precision and coordination. This shifted the psychological calculus in the region. Countries that once saw Iran as a threat to be managed now saw it as a force that had to be reckoned with. The response from regional actors was telling. Some of Iran's adversaries became unusually quiet, recalibrating their public statements and internal policies. Allies and proxy movements of Iran became more vocal, emboldened by the success of the strike and the international attention it generated. Even countries sitting on the geopolitical fence began reassessing their alliances, weighing the cost of continued alignment with the West against the growing reality of a resurgent Iran. Power dynamics are not just about firepower, they're about perception, influence, and timing. Iran struck in a moment of regional volatility, and its move was interpreted not as desperation, but as confidence. The act of a country that believes in the legitimacy and strength of its position. This shift wasn't just military, it echoed through diplomatic circles, intelligence briefings, and media coverage. Every acknowledgement of Iran's capability, especially from figures like Trump, further solidified its emerging image as a regional heavyweight. The fact that this acknowledgement came from a former U.S. president, someone historically critical of Iran, added even more gravity to the moment. The chessboard had shifted, not through quiet negotiation or backdoor diplomacy, but through open confrontation and decisive action. Iran's ability to act and to draw public recognition for that act forced a reevaluation of assumptions that had gone unchallenged for years. The power that had once been viewed through the lens of deterrence was now being seen as operational, assertive, and very real in shaping the next phase of Middle Eastern geopolitics. As the news of Iran's strike on Israel spread across the globe, something profound unfolded in the heart of Tehran. The streets were not filled with fear or uncertainty, but with celebration. Thousands of Iranians poured into public squares and avenues, waving flags, chanting patriotic slogans, and lighting fireworks, as if the nation had won a historic championship. These weren't state-sponsored displays, they were genuine, grassroots expressions of triumph. For many citizens, this was more than just a military response. It was a long overdue moment of national validation. Tehran had become the symbolic stage for a victory that represented pride, resistance, and resurgence. The air was filled with music, car horns, and joy, not just because of the damage inflicted on an adversary, but because of the message it sent. Iran will no longer remain silent under threat. This eruption of public joy was deeply rooted in decades of tension, sanctions, and isolation. The people of Iran had endured economic hardship, media demonization, and military threats for years, but now in the streets of their own capital, they stood tall, feeling a sense of power that had often been denied to them in global discourse. Children danced, elders wept, and the young lit up the sky with flares and colored smoke. Tehran was not just celebrating a military achievement, it was reclaiming dignity on the world stage. For a country so often portrayed as a villain, this strike and the acknowledgement of its impact flipped the narrative, even if just for a moment. The celebrations also reflected a deeper sense of unity among Iranians, transcending political and social divides. People who may have disagreed on domestic issues found common ground in this expression of national strength. It rekindled a spirit of patriotism that had been dulled by years of hardship and international pressure. More importantly, it sent a visual message to the world. Iran is not broken, and its people are not defeated. The joy on the faces of those in Tehran carrying with it the weight of generations that had long been painted into the corner of world affairs. Now, they felt seen, heard, and respected, not through diplomacy, but through direct action and its results. This moment, captured in phone videos shared across social media and broadcast in alternative news outlets, served as a public declaration that Iran was not only willing to fight, it was ready to win. Iran's strike against Israel went far beyond the realm of physical destruction. While the world focused on the tactical precision and damage inflicted, the deeper impact was psychological, particularly on Israel and its allies. For decades, Israel had built a reputation of military superiority in the region, backed by advanced defense systems and unshakable international support. The Iron Dome, intelligence networks, and swift retaliation strategies had created a sense of invincibility, not just within Israel, but in the eyes of its adversaries. But this time, Iran's response shattered that perception. The strike was not symbolic or restrained. It was direct, coordinated, and successful in reaching critical targets. That success deeply unsettled the Israeli public and leadership alike. Suddenly, a very uncomfortable question began to surface. If Iran can do this now, what more is it capable of in the future? The confidence that Israel had long projected began to show cracks. Fear doesn't always arise from loss of life or infrastructure alone. It emerges when a nation realizes that the old assumptions no longer apply. Iran's ability to bypass or overwhelm Israeli defense systems sent a chilling message. The battlefield had changed, and so had the players. This psychological disruption is often more powerful than any missile. It lingers in military planning rooms, in the minds of citizens, and in the decisions of policymakers, who must now operate under new realities. Within Israel, there was also the sting of being caught off guard. For a country known for its intelligence-gathering prowess and preemptive strategies, this successful Iranian strike represented a failure, a breach in both security and perception. The sense of safety that many citizens felt was replaced by anxiety, and the trust in military dominance was questioned. Israel was forced to not only respond militarily, but to confront the growing truth that its enemies were evolving rapidly. Meanwhile, for Iran and its allies, this psychological shift was a victory in itself. They didn't just hit targets, they struck at the heart of Israel's perceived dominance. This ripple effect extended beyond Israel's borders, causing other nations in the region to reconsider their strategies and alliances. What once seemed impossible was now a matter of record. Iran had reached beyond the battlefield and embedded a new level of doubt into the minds of those who once saw themselves as untouchable. As the footage of Iran's strike and the eruption of celebrations in Tehran spread across social media platforms, the contrast with mainstream Western media coverage became immediately apparent. While independent journalists and regional outlets showcased raw clips of joy, pride, and patriotism flooding Iran's streets, major Western networks either downplayed the event or avoided it altogether. The silence was not accidental. It reflected a long-standing discomfort with acknowledging Iran's strength, particularly when it defied the narrative of Western superiority. This deliberate avoidance created a void in information, but it also backfired. In today's hyper-connected world, truth travels quickly, and censorship only fuels curiosity. People began to ask why such a significant geopolitical moment was being ignored. Why were the images of jubilation, the national pride, and the undeniable impact of the strike not headline news? The media's muted reaction served as a stark reminder of how narratives are shaped, filtered, and often distorted. By refusing to fully acknowledge the magnitude of Iran's action and the response from its people, mainstream outlets inadvertently spotlighted their own bias. In doing so, they triggered a deeper awakening among global viewers who turned to alternative sources for a fuller picture. Independent platforms, social media influencers, and regional correspondents filled the gap, offering unfiltered glimpses into the reality on the ground. The result was a growing awareness that what is shown or not shown in the media often serves an agenda. Iran's visible and public sense of triumph stood in defiance of that agenda, and people noticed. His media silence also had a ripple effect on diplomacy and public opinion. In Western nations, citizens began to question why their leaders and newsrooms remained quiet in the face of such a strategic development. For Iran's supporters, the lack of coverage became a symbol of how powerful their statement had been. When the world tries to look away from something so loud, it's not because it's unimportant. It's because it's too real to ignore. The celebrations in Tehran, therefore, were not just for the cameras or local pride. They became a form of global resistance, a loud, undeniable truth in a world of filtered news. And as these visuals spread organically online, they rewrote the story, forcing even the skeptics to admit that something profound had taken place, even if the official headlines refused to say it out loud. For the people of Iran, a strike against Israel and the ensuing public celebrations in Tehran signified far more than a tactical military victory. It was a powerful rekindling of the spirit of resistance that has defined the Iranian identity for generations. For decades, Iranians have faced economic hardship, international isolation, and a near constant narrative of antagonism from Western powers. Sanctions, foreign interventions, and media portrayals attempted to reduce Iran to a perpetual underdog, a nation merely reacting to the forces around it. But this moment shattered that framing. It was not a reactive move born out of desperation. It was deliberate, measured, and undeniably effective. It served as proof that Iran was not simply enduring pressure, but had been steadily preparing for its own moment of reckoning. The sense of empowerment that followed in the wake of the strike was rooted in a national memory of resistance, stretching back through history against empires, colonialism, and occupation. For Iranians, resistance is not just a political strategy, it is a cultural cornerstone. The images of people in the streets waving flags, holding pictures of their leaders, and dancing beneath the fireworks were more than just reactions to a military success. They were expressions of deep emotional release. They reflected a collective soul that had refused to break under years of economic warfare, media distortion, and threats of regime change. In those celebrations, people weren't just honoring a missile launch. They were celebrating their ability to stand firm, to strike back, and to have the world take notice. This resurgence of resistance also reignited pride across a wide spectrum of Iranian society, from university students to rural farmers, from political loyalists to average citizens. The sense of unity and defiance became palpable. It was as if years of silence, doubt, and endurance had finally found a voice. A loud, defiant voice heard across the region. That voice echoed not only in Iran, but among its allies, proxy forces, and oppressed groups throughout the Middle East, who saw in that moment a sign that standing firm was still possible, that resistance was still a viable path. Iran had not only fired missiles, it had reawakened a spirit long suppressed, reminding its people and the world that true strength comes not only from weapons, but from will. The will to resist, to rise, and to reclaim narrative and dignity under pressure. In conclusion, this moment in history marks a dramatic turning point, one that cannot be ignored or rewritten. When Donald Trump, a former U.S. president, publicly acknowledged the power and precision of Iran's strike on Israel, the world was forced to look again at a nation long underestimated and demonized. That strike was not just a military action, it was a message, a declaration that the era of one-sided dominance is over. The celebrations in Tehran were not mere spectacles. They were the heartbeat of a people who have endured, resisted, and finally stood tall in the face of global narratives designed to keep them down. Iran's defiance shattered illusions, its precision shook powerful institutions, and its people reminded the world what pride, resilience, and unity truly look like. This was more than a battle. It was the revival of a legacy, a signal to friend and foe alike, that the spirit of resistance is not only alive, but roaring with purpose. Thank you for staying with us through this powerful story of awakening and truth. May your voice always rise in moments of silence, May your courage outlast every challenge, and may your light never be dimmed by the shadows of doubt. Stay strong, stay aware, and stay inspired. Good luck, and thank you.